Welcome back to the Createch stage at Virtual CogX. A special welcome to those of you who are new to the stage. The Createch stage is hosted by the Creative Industries Council and supported by Facebook, UKRI, Moore Kingston Smith and Digital Catapult. I'm Janet Hull. I represent the UK Creative Industries Council and I am your MC for the day. CogX is all about community. And if the creative industries is the community you want to belong to, just email us at createch@thecreativeindustries.co.uk and we'll make sure to keep you posted on what we're up to. Please hashtag your appreciation of Createch too, using hashtag Createch and CognitionX 2020. The overall theme of CogX this year is how do we get the next 10 years right? And for us in the UK creative industries, for this next session, that means how does UK advertising stay ahead of the curve in understanding where new technologies are going to take us? And what does it mean for storytelling and interactive communications? This session is curated by the UK Advertising Export Group, which launches its summer showcase at CogX on the Createch stage today. In this session, we're exploring the new tools of engagement, voice, AR, chatbot, and AI. A warm welcome to Aisling Conlon, head of the new UK Advertising Export Group.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining us at this session. As Janet said, my name's Aisling and I'm here representing the UK Advertising Exports Group. We have told stories since the dawn of time and the way we tell stories is constantly evolving. I think it's fair to say that 2020 looks set to be a year that we will talk about for generations to come. Here in the UK, it's home to some of the world's leading storytellers, and at the UK Advertising Exports Group, we are delighted to celebrate those narrators from right across the advertising industry who help brands tell their stories around the world. This is just one of the many reasons why the UK is the global hub of advertising. Perhaps fitting at a tech festival is the fact that much of our work is driven by our position as the world's most advanced digital advertising economy. Third only in size to the US and China, according to a recent report by Credos, the UK industry's think tank. As we adapt to the impact of COVID-19, UK advertising is very much open for business and continues to work with clients and partners all around the world. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by three companies who are representing UK AG for our discussion. We only have 40 minutes, but don't worry, at the end of the session, I can tell you where you can hear more from us. But right now, I'd like to ask each of the panel to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Daniel.
Hi there, good to be here. I'm Daniel Cheetham. I currently run a business called Happy Finish, or what we're referring to as HF. HF is in the business of content experience creation. We work across a gamut of immersive media. I joined about 6 or 7 years ago and built the immersive tech division of the business. We're headquartered in London, but have actually been operational and live out of Portland, Oregon in the US for about 5 years now as well, servicing some big clients.
FX Digital. We're a London-based agency. We work specifically with voice technologies like Alexa and Google Assistant, but also with connected TV technologies, and that could be smart TV, console, things like your Samsung Tizen or your PlayStation and Xbox. We're a young but very fast-growing agency, and we have a real strong focus on research and development and reinvest a lot of the profits in the business back into that.
Okay, and last but certainly not least, Kibwe.
Tavares, I'm a director and co-founder of a company called Factory 15. We work across animation and the built environment, and across film and advertising also. And we're London-based. And yeah, we work in VR, digital animation, VFX, and animation.
And you've also wrote one of those beautiful shorts, Robot and Scarecrow, yeah, which if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go and check it out today.
And I work with Nexus Studios for commercial work as a director.
Thank you. So this session is, we're looking forward, but I actually want to take a step back because Matthew and Daniel, we were all supposed to travel to South by Southwest in March. We had a stage. You were both going to do some talks with me. We know that event got cancelled. And since then, our worlds have changed massively. Lockdown, we're all spending a lot more time at home and, spending time indoors. And I guess my first question, Kibwe, is what role do you think storytelling has played in all of this?
For me, stories are everything. From in terms of just personally, kind of like got me through times that felt kind of very, very dark. Kind of the ability to kind of like escape into a story, escape into another world. Whether that's kind of like a piece of film or a piece of TV or a podcast or a book, has just allowed me. It's kind of just helped me through really. So I think it's been massively important for everyone, and it's in so many things really across the gamut. Whether that's film, TV, even the news to a certain extent.
And then Matthew and Daniel, we know a lot of people have spent time on their own. Some people have been craving forms of escapism. I mean, I could say that 4 months ago, Zoom and Teams was not part of my language. I must say it about 20 times a day now. The tech that you both work in, what role do you think that's played in creating the environment around us over the last couple of months?
Yeah, of course. So the technologies we work with, voice and TV, have seen explosive growth during the lockdown. So people being at home more essentially means that they're using these technologies more often. If we take voice, for example, over half of voice users have reported that they've increased consumption on their devices. So we're really seeing the effects of people being at home more often and using these technologies. And this really comes into play when you think, I mean, me in particular, I've actually been at home in a one-bed flat on my own for the last 10 weeks. And I've only really had Google Assistant to be there with me for comfort as the only thing that I've really spoke to. And it's been quite fascinating to wake up and, start some music and ask for the time and just kick things off by speaking with Google Assistant rather than a human. It's been quite unnerving, but a real different experience.
And Daniel?
It's interesting, Matt, actually. I mean, I sometimes have felt unfortunate to be locked in with my family, but we're all still alive and I haven't killed them yet, so it's fine. But I've noticed actually on the voice front that my daughter, India, she treats Google Assistant like a friend. She'll sometimes just ask Google how she's doing. So, there's an interesting social interaction happening there.
Yeah.
How is Google doing during lockdown?
Really well. I think they've seen an increase in consumption and it's flying. So I imagine Google's doing great during lockdown.
Sorry, Daniel.
It's all right, don't worry. The areas we work in immersive technology, I think interestingly, I've seen definitely more AR filters being used over this period. I mean, on Zooms, maybe for work or even with friends, I quite enjoy turning up as a pickle occasionally. It's quite fun. But us humans, we thrive off social interaction. Actually, it's chemically in our brain. There's a reaction that happens when we interact with others. It's oxytocin that triggers serotonin. It's like a little hit of positivity we get when we interact with others. And I think that one of the reasons we're seeing AR being adopted in that sort of more fun way is it just adds another layer of depth to the interaction with other human beings. It's a little more engaging. So I think adoption is going up. It's happening on the devices we already have at home, across our mobile devices, across our browsers, not necessarily on headsets or VR headsets or mixed reality headsets.
So I guess from that point, as we're starting to ease out of lockdown, and I guess our environments are changing again. Maybe this is one for you, Matthew. Do you feel like tech is just becoming mainstream and accessible, like Daniel's referred to?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the most amazing things about voice to me is that it is exactly that. It is such an accessible technology by nature. There's many people in the world that can't use computers or can't use laptops and things like that, or mobile phones, and voice is another way of receiving information and interfacing with a device. What's really interesting and what I'm really fascinated to see over the next, say, 3 to 6 months is if these trends that we've seen during the lockdown are going to continue and spark off potentially even greater uptake of voice and connected TV usage.
Because that was, I think that's probably my next question. Do you think, let's look forward a little bit more now, but do you think that the model of engagement has changed? And if so, do you see that, I guess, is it short term or is it long term?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I feel like it really depends on how we're defining. A lot of people keep talking about the new normal. What is this new normal? Is it more people staying at home? If it's more people staying at home, then yes, we're going to see usage of devices like Alexa and Google's Assistant increase, mainly because they're a home device. People have them in their bedroom to listen to music, or in their kitchen to read recipes. If the new normal means potentially less touching of things because we don't want to spread disease, then again, voice definitely has a big part to play in that. So with those two technologies in particular, I definitely feel really confident that the growth is definitely going to be there after lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, I buy into that totally, and I think from a tech adoption in general, I mean, we've seen figures that sales of technology products have been really exponentially increasing during this period. Also in gaming, people are buying consoles and engaging more in gaming. And I think I've often been asked, when is the iPhone moment of augmented reality, mixed reality? And honestly, it's when Apple get into the game in a bigger way. And I think we can honestly look now at the rumors that are starting to solidify. And we know that Apple are going to be coming to market with their eyewear, their AR glasses at some point in the near future. Look out for announcements at their Worldwide Dev Conference, I'd say. But at that point, with the Apple cool factor, it being a peripheral for your mobile device, I think we'll see even greater adoption. And it's not just about visual AR; it's also about audio. The two go hand in hand.
Kibwe, after hearing Matthew and Daniel say that, do you think the tools of storytelling are changing, or are they going to stay the same? Will it move with the tech, or does it need to?
For me, I use a lot of tech in my work, but I feel that they're just tools to really tell the story. The story comes first, and I guess the kind of broader your palette of tools and the bigger your kind of toolbox, maybe the more, I guess, in a way, you've just got more things and you've got more access and kind of you can be a bit broader. So I don't think that the tech necessarily changes the need or how the stories are told. Maybe how the stories are told, but not necessarily the need. I think the need's always going to be there. They might kind of just change exactly how they're told. So, yeah. Yeah.
And Matthew and Daniel, do you think, because you both work with the tech, what's your opinion on how technology can enhance storytelling?
Yeah, I think what's really important is that we have to, the execution of the story is still fundamentally important, and the technology is really there just to enhance the experience or make the story more accessible. I think the art of storytelling is always and will always remain the same, but the mediums that we use and the way that we distribute that to our audience is the innovation, really.
I mean, I totally agree. I mean, it's you choose the right tool for the task in hand and the audience that you're talking to, and sometimes it can be very challenging to tell a linear story using a more spatial medium where, I've seen it happen before, where the point of the story, a key part of the message we're trying to get across, is in space A, but just at that point, people might be looking and engaging with something in C, just checking out the coffee cup on the table, and that throws up some interesting challenges in trying to, be the author and narrate the story to people, keep people's attention.
Yeah, definitely. I think in voice, the wonderful thing about voice for us as an agency is that it gives us the ability to create more interactive stories. So it's not about just broadcasting something to someone and letting them consume it. It's now about getting someone to respond and then reacting to their response. So we're always trying to create experiences that get people to, put their phone down and turn it over, to drop that piece of technology, to sort of really immerse themselves and engage with something like a voice skill.
And from that, we know from studies such as the IPA's long and short of it, just how important emotion is when it comes to advertising. Do you find that it's easier or more challenging to bring people on an emotional journey through the tech that you use?
Sorry, go on, Kibwe. Excuse me.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I guess it kind of ties into what I was saying previously, like, easy or hard is kind of like maybe a bit too binary. Like, if what you're trying to kind of do is connect with people and like you find your way to do that through this technology, if you sort of lead with what you're trying to do and then you kind of get the right technology to kind of fit into how you then, if it helps, as opposed to kind of like necessarily kind of leading tech first. But I do think it can be additive, definitely. But easy and hard is kind of like a hard, maybe a binary way to put it. Like, I think the more options you have, in some ways it easier can be, but also it can sometimes make it harder because you're kind of like, instead of just focusing on what you're meant to be doing, you kind of, you get caught on trying to kind of do it with a certain piece of technology. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that execution again. So, I mean, I've seen skills on Alexa that are fantastic and they really engage me and they really immerse me into a story. But additionally, I've seen skills on Alexa where, you know, I'm not that engaged and I don't get that emotional experience. So it's not necessarily about the technology. It's always about the execution of that story and the experience.
Perhaps if it would be good to tell people in the audience about the recent voice that you guys did at FX Digital.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that was a piece that we did, just thinking here about the proof of concept for the NHS 111 service that we created for voice. And that was really to try and solve a need, which is, you know, the sort of phone lines and the internet service from 111 being overrun, and also trying to provide that information in a more accessible format. So the team wanted to do it themselves. It wasn't something that me or my business partner Tom suggested they do. They're really keen at this sort of stuff, and they pulled together a proof of concept for the NHS 111 site, and then push that information through into voice to make it more accessible. And that's just an example of how we can create. We can distribute a single story, or in this case, piece of information, across a different piece of technology to make it more accessible for more people, which really is where technology helps.
And Daniel, sorry, just taking it back to what do you think about emotion when it comes to tech? Is it easier or more challenging? What's your thoughts?
I mean, there's sort of two different answers to that one, actually. It's more challenging if you lose your audience because of tech. You know, on multiple occasions I've seen overcomplicated user experience gets in the way, act as a barrier for people to engage in content. But if you get it right, what you're doing is putting the end user in the center of an experience. And I've used this quote so many times, and all of my colleagues will probably feel a little bit sick in their mouth hearing it again. But it's purportedly Confucius, but nobody can. But it's tell me and I'll forget, show me I may remember, involve me and I'll understand. And being able to put someone in the center of something that they feel is happening around them, the brain acts in a different way. It can make it more memorable. So if you get it right, it can be, I think, exponentially more powerful.
And to follow up from that, because you're referencing being in the center, the main theme of this whole conference over the next 3 days is getting the next 10 years right. So how do we put the consumer at the center to inform, to help them get the next 10 years right, or to have a positive impact on society?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think we're in a position now where there are going to be enormous opportunity for brands that are willing to take a risk and invest in sort of innovative ways of telling stories. I think there's going to be a lot of companies and brands out there trying to weather the storm, and I think the window of opportunity is now to start looking at these other technologies to try and enhance the storytelling, and exactly that, bring the user into the center of the experience.
Yeah. So for me, I think in general, technology makes things more accessible, and so if the technology can sort of give more people, I feel lucky that I can sort of tell stories and direct stories for a living, and I think the larger the amount of people who can do that, I think that's going to be how you kind of get the next 10 years right. Like by kind of like technology giving access to more people to kind of tell whether it's their story or a story, and have a broader kind of sense of storytelling will be how, for me, how you kind of like allow more people in to the conversation.
Daniel?
One of the areas we work in is fashion. So, I mean, 10 years right, getting it right, it's a big question. There's lots of angles of what right means. But in the fashion industry, for example, one of the areas we're working on is digital twinning of products. So removing reliance on physical sampling in the design process, in the sales process, all the way through to how consumers make decisions to remove, the potential returns that might happen. So I think just got to keep looking at the problems. Keep looking at the problems and thinking pragmatically about what technology can bring as a solution.
Yeah. I think just to echo that, I think it's about, so many times we see someone, I mean, as an agency, we see a lot of customers that come to us and go, I want to create a voice experience. I want to create a connected TV experience. Whereas really you need to take a step back and think, what's the story or the piece that I want to create, and what technology can support that. So it's not thinking about technology first, but thinking about the story first.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I'm going to bring it to a question that's come in from the audience, which is, what do you think are ethical considerations of people becoming more dependent on AI, particularly younger audiences? Who would like to take that one first?
I have some really interesting thoughts on this. I mean, at least I think they're interesting. so basically, I find it fascinating the way children interact and interface with voice assistants. They're very polite, and they treat them as if they're exactly that, another human. Whereas adults, when I experience adults talking to voice assistants, it's much more direct, much more blunt. I personally try to say thank you and please to Google Assistant, and I don't think many adults do. But when I see a child interacting with voice, it's very different. And in particular, I think, well, a person's, especially the youngest generation, a person's relationship with their voice assistant will evolve so much over the time of their life. Like from being a young child to the voice assistant being there for playtime, and you having that sort of friendship relationship with it, to going to school and maybe using voice assistants for accessing important information, to then being an adult and all of a sudden your voice assistant is probably in charge of your home security. So I'm going to be really interested to see how this younger generation grow up with voice assistants and artificial intelligence there along the way with them. I think the relationship with them is going to change as they grow older. And
I just sort of, something that you've made me sort of think of there is the interactive experience that we all get. And it's a question for both of you. What role does storytelling play in that interactive experience? If I go to Matthew, if I go to you first, what role do you think that it plays in the storytelling plays in the interactive experience?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly important. We're actually building voice skills at the moment, working with children's content producers to basically create more interactive stories. So rather than children consuming content on a children's television channel, maybe they can use a voice assistant to have almost like a choose your own adventure style game, which gets them up, gets them jumping around the living room a little bit, and gets them really immersed and involved in a story. Too many times we see people, just sort of sitting back and just consuming a piece of content. The storytelling and the interactive piece is so important because it can do exactly what we were talking about before. It can create that emotion. It can make people put their phone down, and it can really immerse you into the experience.
Yeah.
Kibwe, do you have any?
I see that. Like, I think that sometimes the interactive elements make it a lot harder because you can't. I still think people are kind of finding their way how to offer these interactive experiences, because, say, in a traditional linear story, you've got editing or something like that allows you to kind of say, look, I want you to see this at this point, and this when I want you to see it. So then it allows you as the author a lot more control. And I think we're still sort of like finding our way in how we sort of like author interactive stuff, just because it's so much more complicated with people kind of like reacting and responding in different ways.
And I'm looking at the clock beside me because I want to make sure that we can get some questions in from the audience. So we've looked at the last 3 months. We've looked at where we're in now. The fun bit is the crystal balls, a bit of future gazing. And I'm going to break this down into 2 sections because in our briefing, we've talked about the importance of 20 years being the number that you're supposed to use. But what I'd like to know, and Daniel, you may have touched on this earlier, is what should we all be aware of that are that's coming up for voice and AR in the next year? And then afterwards, I'm going to ask you what you would predict might happen in the next 20 years. Are the robots going to take over? What world will we live in? So if we start with just looking ahead for the next 12 months.
I mean, I'm happy to jump in there. I mean, for sure. I mean, I've referenced keeping an eye on what Apple might do in the peripheral space, in the eyewear space. It's gonna have an impact, I think. But also there's some really fast developments happening in the real-time engine space. So they're the tools like Unreal, Unity, that in the areas we work in, we use a lot, that allow us to create content which is, you know, hyper-realistic, photorealistic, working in really fast iteration. So I think the tools that the creators will have at their disposal are just getting so much better. And in machine learning as well, it's such an exponentially fast and developing space. The tools that go behind chatbots, so using transformers, GANs, to improve the humanness and engagedness of those bots, I think we're going to see some rapid developments there. And that's just 1 year.
What do you think is going to happen, Matthew?
So if I think about voice, I think in particular there's probably 2 key sort of growth opportunities. The first is in voice commerce. So I think we're going to see a lot more released onto the platform that allows people to make purchases, potentially reordering their favorite pizzas, or adding things to their basket and then checking them out from the comfort of their kitchen whilst they're cooking and running out of their herbs and spices. So a lot more of that. But then additionally, I think we're going to start to see voice sort of spread and sort of be pushed out into every sort of device, or not every, but a lot of devices across industries. So I think as a reaction to the lockdown, I think we'll see voice push into those commercial use cases a lot more. So right now it's obviously very popular in the residential home, but I think about someone maybe taking a stock take in a restaurant or a bar, and maybe not wanting to use a communal device that somebody else has been touching, or try to be a little bit healthier. So having a voice assistant there with you, so that you can interact with them and let the voice assistant know what the stock take is potentially something that could be really useful. So I think there's 2 real key growth areas there for voice, which is v-commerce and then voice everywhere.
And then in the next 20 years, what will the world look like?
Yeah. 20 years.
Next 20 years. I would. You go for it.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the robots taking over is a nice, obviously a common thing that like you kind of see in like science fiction movies. But I think the environment, unless we get a handle on that sooner, like that will happen before the robots take over.
So the robots are taking over.
Very bleak prediction there from Kibwe.
No, but he's right. He's right.
Yeah.
It's we're in the middle of a pandemic. We've got lots of stuff happening around the world, which is challenging us morally. But the bigger challenge we face is really planetary survival. It's close to my heart. Always thinking about what we can do to encourage behavioural change for the positive there, with the little widgets and gadgets and tech that we've got at our disposal. But ultimately, it comes down to what Kibwe does really well in telling stories. Stories have always been used to encourage behavioural change, to encourage morals, to understand morals. And so I think it's a combination of the new tech, the old means of telling stories, and the right sentiment behind those stories. So I think Kibwe is absolutely right on that front.
Yeah,
I actually also think that it's not necessarily humans who will be responsible for telling those stories. I think we'll see machine learning and personalization of content from me and us as individuals that is not necessarily a story in a time boxed way, but something which sits alongside us and that dips in and out of our life as we dip in and out of that story, and that can be orchestrated and managed through our own little personal machine learning algorithms.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the next 20 years, especially with voice, I always think about it's a famous law that says we always overestimate the potential of technology in the short term and then underestimate the potential of technology in the long term. And I think that's definitely true with voice. I think some of the statistics I see that are thrown out and some of the predictions when it comes to voice are, very out there. But I don't think you can deny that it has, a real big opportunity to become a very essential technology in our human lives, especially over the next 20 years. I think what it has that's different to a lot of technologies that pop up and then perhaps die is that accessibility piece. So it really is a tool or a medium that pushes stories and information out to more people that previously couldn't potentially have otherwise accessed those stories.
And my last question, I think, before we take some questions that have come in from the audience, is just for any brands that are sitting who've come to this talk. What advice would you give them if they are thinking about how to involve tech in how they tell their stories? Obviously, the first thing you're going to say is to contact you. But the second thing, what would be your advice for anyone who's sitting in that audience?
For me, I think don't think about the technology first. Think about, what's the story, what's the problem you're trying to solve, and then come to a company like ours to basically try and find innovative ways of solving that problem or telling that story. That's where we really thrive when someone comes to us and is like, we have this story, we have this piece of content we want to get out there. How do we do it? Like, don't think technology first, think story first, then execution.
Yeah, I totally echo that. Some of the worst briefs I've ever received have been, we need to do VR or we need to do AR. It's like that's that. Actually, no, let's take a step back. Look at your goal, look at the audience, look at what you're trying to achieve in terms of a behavioral change in that audience, whether that's an enterprise audience, an internal audience, employees, consumers, whatever that might be. Let's look at the objective, and then we can candidly talk about what tools are the right tools to fulfill against that.
Great. There's some really good questions that have come in, so I'm going to sort of jump over to those. The first one is a brilliant question. I'm interested in the role you may see for voice AR in less creative businesses, for example, utility companies. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great one. I think, like I mentioned earlier, voice definitely has a real opportunity now to push out into those commercial use cases. If we take utilities as an example, like it's quite a hands-on job if you're going in and you're maybe playing with a boiler or meters or things like that. So in any job where your hands are being used quite a lot, voice as a companion to be able to record information, push things through, stuff like that is very useful. So I think in those jobs where they're very hands-on, mechanics, for example, voice is going to be great. And I think this probably segues into some of the stuff you guys touched on, Daniel. But I think about that mechanic example and think about someone trying to replace an engine, or I'm not a mechanic, I have no idea how to build cars, but if someone's trying to replace a piece on an engine, they could be talking to a voice assistant that could be giving them information about how to do that, whilst an augmented reality piece is in front of them, showing them which tools they need to be using, how they can screw that bolt in. And that's how that technology helps in a commercial setting.
Yeah, on that very specific point, and this is not really utilities, but it's in very much in the engineering space. And Lockheed Martin, it was quite embarrassing actually when I was told this, because I kept saying spaceships. That's not an adult thing. Nobody makes spaceships, only in science fiction. Spacecraft, right? But where previously the engineers building the spacecraft craft would have to refer to a really big manual, and they're in a dust-free environment. When they started using the HoloLens to augment the instructions for the engineers on, how many times should I turn that particular screw, or it's probably a bit more complex than that. But the number of errors that they were facing in their manufacturing process was pretty much eliminated. So, it has that power. And where we are with 5G coming, with computer vision, so 5G allowing the compute power not to happen on a device, but to happen in the cloud behind us. We have exponentially more compute power. We'll be looking at persistence of AR. So spatial anchors, so augmented reality components, digital components remaining persistent in the space they are locked in the real world, and also being able to recognize physical objects on the fly in real time. So you see, it opens up a lot of interesting, more technical solutions. Maybe one day I'll be able to change a fuse. You never know.
Don't get ahead of yourself.
It's risky business.
There's another great question. Voice makes the stories more accessible, but what do you think is needed to make voice and the AI, ML behind them more accessible for those who benefit most?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a lot spoken about the technologies behind voice and sort of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I think it goes back to that question of ethics. So it's about making sure that we, as people that are creating and using these technologies, are creating them for the greater good of everyone, not just for use by specific people. Like, we live on a entire planet here, so we should be creating technology that is intended for the use of every single human being. So I think it's really about that ethics question, which I think is why it's so amazing that debate of ethics constantly comes up when we talk about things like voice, machine learning, computer vision.
Okay.
Matt, and a question for me, sorry. Matt, do you think we should be trying to make voice more human-like? Or should there be a distinction between when something is autonomous, AI-based, versus a human? Because there's obviously an interesting debate.
Yeah, I think, I mean, me personally, yes, I think so. I think I always think about the question, which is, which of the voice assistants will become the voice assistant, the superior voice assistant. And to be honest, my belief is that I don't think there will be one. I think what we'll have a device that could have multiple installed on them, and that you'll use different voice assistants for different purposes. You might go to Google because you want information from its rich knowledge source, but you might go to Alexa because you want it to manage the home security. So I think we'll have loads of different sort of assistants, that are used for different specific needs. And I think it needs to be clear what they're used for. It needs to be clear that you're speaking to a voice assistant. I think if we go down the route of almost like Matrix style computer interpretations of humans, I think it's very murky water. And I know we've spoken about that before, Daniel. And the sort of idea of simulation theory is something that every techie loves to speak about, and it's a scary thought.
Kibwe, I've got a question for you, because all everything that the Matthew and Daniel are saying. I mean, Can we see some of this coming into your craft over the next year or two, do you think?
Potentially. The only reason it hasn't is because it's for opportunity, really. So whether it's in the actual, because I've been kind of just really working with techniques and craft that I've kind of been working with for years, and I haven't kind of refining that as opposed to kind of adding loads of new stuff. So I think I'm open. I would love to kind of use AI or machine learning as part of my storytelling process, and also as an experiment to kind of see where that actually ends up. I don't know whether it'll end up just yet, but yeah.
We should watch this space.
Yeah.
Happy to compare notes, Kibwe.
One point I would like to make is there is a lot of questions coming in, and we also have a clock in the corner which is telling us how much time is left for this event. So the good news for all of you who have questions is Matthew and Daniel are going to be talking again. Daniel, you're up at 4:30 today at a talk called Me, Myself and AI. So I would suggest people that want to ask you more questions, make sure they've scheduled that, and then they can ask you questions at the end of that session. And Matthew, you've got a talk tomorrow looking at voice and how brands can engage on that. That's at 9:30 a.m. Again, if we don't get time to answer your question, please schedule that in, and Matthew will be able to answer your questions at that. I can see the clock is still ticking. The other things that I will say is that there's more chance to meet with all of us from UK AEG. As Janet said, this is the start of a summer showcase. We're also going to be at Lions Live, Sheaf, and other global events around the world. You can pop by the UK AEG booth, you can chat to me about UK AEG, or you can find any of these guys through the CogX app simply by searching them. And I think you'll be more than happy to chat to everybody. Am I right in saying that?
No, not at all. No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Always open.
Give me a shout.
Always open.
So that's what I suggest we do, that with all those questions, please come and join us at the other sessions, because we want to make sure that we answer them all for you. And so, yeah, so come and join Daniel at 4:30 and then join Matthew tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you found it all very useful.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you, guys. Apologies for the connection issues. Always the way.
Technology.
Thanks so much, Ashlyn, Matt, Kibwe and Daniel. A fascinating discussion of how new tech tools can enhance storytelling or perhaps limit storytelling. It seems that it's early days of knowing quite how to get it right. In voice, there are different sorts of assistants for different sorts of needs. There are lots of things to think about from an ethical standpoint, but the feeling is that the next generation are on it, so we'd better start getting to grips with it. It looks like we're at a turning point. So great news to hear that you can quiz Ashlyn and the team further about this topic on the UK AEG Expo booth, 4:30 today and 9:30 tomorrow. It sounds like there's a lot of questions that you want to ask, so do join them there. We're taking a break from the main Createch stage now to give you the chance to explore the rest of the festival, so you won't have conflicts if you want to go to UK AEG. Or you can catch up on emails or just take a break. We're back in business from 5 till 7 with 2 more fascinating sessions. The first is linked a little bit to the one we've just seen. It's about the groundbreaking work UKRI are doing in their Audience of the Future programme. It's working with Createch Wants to Watch companies, and it's all about VR and AR. The second is an interesting reflection on how events like these at CogX are pivoting to digital platforms and what good looks like. Called From Live to Virtual, it features, among others, the creative director of Swan Films, the production company behind the Channel 4 hit success Grayson's Art Club, and, excitingly, the creative director of Shangri-La at Glastonbury and the Last Horizon Festival. And there will be new news to share. See you at 5 o'clock.
Want access to more CogX videos? Subscribe now for free at cogx.co.